Hi, can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, here we go. We're going to start. This is a reminder to all members of the public that's participating in our virtual Planning and Zoning Commission meeting that if you would like to speak on a particular item during public comment period, please click on raise your hand icon at the bottom of the screen. You'll be prompted to speak up to 3 minutes when it's your turn. For those who is participating by telephone and would like to make a public comment, please press *9 to request to speak. Thank you for your participation. Okay, Chair.
Thank you. And thank you everyone who's joining us in this unusual remote hearing. It's 7 o'clock and we'll go ahead and call this Albany Planning and Zoning Commission April 29th hearing to order. With that, Anne, if we can get roll call, please.
Yes, Commissioner Donaldson?
Here.
Commissioner Jennings?
Here.
Commissioner Kent?
Here.
Commissioner McLeod?
Here.
And Chair Waddy?
Here. All right, that'll take us on to item 3 on our agenda, which are ex parte communications for the commission. Do any commissioners have any ex parte communications to disclose?
None.
No.
None.
Okay. None. Seeing none, we'll move on to item 4 on our agenda. Item 4 is the consent calendar. Consent calendar items are considered to be routine and will be enacted on by one motion. By approval of the consent calendar, staff recommendation will be adopted unless otherwise modified by the commission. There will be no separate discussion on these items unless a member of the commission or a member of the public wishes to have these items removed from consent. Anne, could we first turn to see if there are any members of the public who are participating who wanted to pull any of these off of the consent calendar?
And actually, I just want to make one announcement. The property owners for 1148 Garfield asked to have their application continued. They're going to work on some design revisions and file a revised application with the city.
Okay. So with that, are there any other requests to move the other remaining items off of the consent calendar? I'll first, I guess I'll go ahead and read each of those. So first up, we've got 3 items. First is item 4-1, Planning and Zoning Committee meeting minutes of March 11th. Item 4-2, Planning Application 20-012. Oh, I'm sorry, this is the Garfield Avenue one, which will be coming off consent. And item 4-3, Planning Application 20-013, Design Review for Kitchen Addition at St. Mary's College, 1600 Posen. That? Commissioner McLeod?
I just had a couple of questions for the St. Mary's kitchen project.
Okay.
So we could pull that, just
Okay.
comments. I don't have any issues with approving it, but I just wanted to perhaps ask the facilities person or the architect a question.
Okay.
I had one word comment on the minutes.
Okay.
There's no member of the public that raised their hand to speak.
Okay, wonderful. With then we'll kind of close public comment on the consent calendar. And on the meeting minutes, Commissioner Donaldson, do you want to share what that one edit is? And then perhaps we can take that one separately.
I will. It's very minor. But on page 4, line 34, it said Kelly Smith concurred with Mr. Broggins. It should be Mr. Brokens. So she's concurring with the speaker ahead of her. So yes. So just you put Steve Brokens' name in there. That would be the only thing.
With that, did you want to make a motion to approve the meeting minutes?
Sure. I'll make a motion to approve the minutes of March 11th.
Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Okay. On that motion, and we'll go ahead and do an individual, we'll call each commissioners for every vote since we're in a remote setting here. So commissioners either say aye or raise your hand to the affirmative if you vote yes. We'll start Commissioner McLeod.
Aye.
Commissioner Donaldson.
Aye.
Commissioner Jennings.
Aye.
Commissioner Kent.
Aye.
And I too approve that motion. So that motion passes 5-0. That's approving the meeting minutes of March 11th. And with that, why don't we go ahead and take item 4-3, 1600 Posen we'll take that for discussion right now. And Commissioner McLeod, did you want a staff presentation, or do you want to just share your comments and ask some questions?
I think just sharing the comments would be fine. In fact, I don't even need a presentation, but I could just make them and they could take it into account. It's just the question was about the kitchen, whether we'll have gas appliances. I would encourage them to do an all-electric kitchen. And also with the idea of it being more in line with our sustainability goals with the climate action plan, in which 40% of our greenhouse gases come from burning fossil fuels. And then in conjunction with solar panels and battery backup, this could also create better resilience in the city. It could be a possible emergency kitchen in a natural disaster or something like that. So that was one comment. And then the other comment was about the bathrooms. They're labeled currently men and women, and there's a big movement to do all gender or gender neutral bathrooms. So I think that may be more in the building code or state law, not in the planning code, but I just think that needs to be addressed. And that would create, it would also be a different physical layout from what they've shown. So that was the issue. Those are the two things I was thinking about. And that's it. Thanks.
Do we have the applicant from St. Mary's here to respond to any of those questions?
I don't see my square, but Mark Headley, I'm the Director of Facilities for St. Mary's High School.
Thank you. We can hear you. Go ahead.
Okay. Yeah, I heard the Commissioner McLeod's comments, and that's something that we can certainly talk about in-house when we get back and meet about the project. We were moving forward with more standard plans, obviously, is what you see on the plans that were submitted. So we hadn't planned on an all-electric kitchen. I know there's a movement to look at that, so that's something we can definitely discuss in-house to see if that might be feasible. And being a private Catholic high school, we are certainly aware of the movement towards all gender or gender neutral restrooms. But I have some concerns about how the families that send their kids to St. Mary's might feel about that. So something that we will discuss in-house and talk about.
Okay, that sounds good to me. One issue with gender or all gender bathrooms is they can just be private. It's not necessarily that it creates something unusual, but it just allows for more privacy in a lot of ways. So, and then on the question of the electric kitchen, there's a lot of good electric appliances there available now. So that should be something that is achievable as well. So thank you.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner.
Okay. Do any other commissioners have any comments before we make a motion on this item? Okay. Is there any commissioner who'd like to make a motion and move this item forward?
I guess I could. I'll move approval of planning application 2013, design review for kitchen addition at St. Mary's College High School, and with the condition that the applicant, the high school, will consider Commissioner McLeod's comments and modify the plans if they decide it's appropriate.
Okay, great. Do we have a second on that motion?
I'll second.
Okay, great. And with that, we'll call for the vote then. Commissioner McLeod.
Aye.
Commissioner Kent.
Aye.
Commissioner Jennings.
Aye.
Commissioner Donaldson.
Aye.
And I too support that motion. That motion passes 5-0, approving permit planning application 20-013 for St. Mary's College. That moves us on to item 5 on our agenda. Item 5 is general public comment. General public comment is for folks desiring to address the commission on an item that is not otherwise agendized for discussion or for action tonight. Anne, do we have anyone here, either of the Anns here for general public comment?
No, we right now, no.
Okay, great. Just because this is a little unusual, if the other commissioners are okay, we'll check back at the end of our formal agenda and see if anyone else jumps in for general public comment between now and then. But with that, item 5 is closed, and we'll move on to item 6 on our agenda. This is discussion and possible action. First up is item 6-1. This was continued from March 11th, and this is relating to proposed amendments to secondary residential units, also known as accessory dwelling unit ordinance. And with that, we'll turn it over to staff for a presentation.
Hi, good evening, everyone. Once again, these are the proposed amendments to Chapter 2020-080, Secondary Residential Units of the Albany Municipal Code. My apologies, I wasn't present at the last commission hearing because I was ill, but hopefully we can answer most of their questions if you have any today. Just really quick, I'll do a quick presentation and then we can just jump into any questions or concerns with the draft ordinance. As you know, of the first of this year, AB 881, SB 13, and AB 68 were signed into effect by Governor Newsom. These new state law changes have rendered Chapter 2020-080 of the AMC non-compliant and no longer valid in reviewing accessory dwelling unit projects in the city of Albany. At the March 11th Planning and Zoning Commission hearing, the commission provided staff with feedback regarding specific language modification, requests for additional definitions, and requested further clarification on portions of the draft ordinance. More specifically, just to highlight a few things that we've added since that time, we've added definitions for impact fee, definitions for primary unit, primary residence. We've clarified some language on the building permit approval track, some further clarification on the ADU permit requirements, and clarified maximum floor area ratio or floor area requirements for detached and attached ADUs, and included side and rear yard setbacks under the specific ADU regulations in the ordinance. And that's basically it. And with that, staff can answer any of the questions that the commission has with the current draft and before you tonight. Thank you.
Okay, great. Why don't we first open it up to commissioners to see if there are any questions of staff before we open it up for public comment.
I have none.
None.
None?
And done.
Okay. Seeing as there are no questions for staff, we will go ahead and open it up to see, is there any public comment on this item?
I do not see any raised hands.
Okay. With that, then public comment is closed and we'll turn it back for discussion. Commissioners, does anyone have any comments on this proposed ordinance?
I have just a couple of really minor nits. So on the last round of review, I did have a bunch of comments that I expressed verbally, and it looks like staff have done a great job of incorporating those changes and just making clarifying edits to the ordinance. So I really don't have anything substantive to offer, but I did notice just on the resolution itself, this might get fixed on its own, but it's labeled as resolution 2020-01. And I don't think that's accurate because I think we have adopted at least a couple of resolutions so far this year, at least according to the resolution, draft resolution that's in our packet for the next item. So just wanted to make sure we catch that. And then the only other thing was in the definitions of section 2020-080. So this is section C10 for primary unit or primary residence. It says a single family or multifamily residential dwelling unit that either exits on or is proposed for, and that should be exists.
Okay.
Instead of exits. So again, really minor nit. I just wanted to clean that up.
No, that's great. Thank you.
Any other, Commissioner Kent? You're on mute, Commissioner Kent. I'll unmute you. There you go.
The height is set at 16 feet. Is that a state regulation?
Yes, that's correct.
Oh,
Commissioners? Commissioner Donaldson, did you have comments?
yes, I see something I had noticed when reading through it. On page 8, there's a reference to the septic system. I don't think we need that. And I don't think we have any septic systems in Albany. I think we require everyone to be connected to the sewer. And the sewer connection was addressed in another section. I saw that. So I think I'd maybe ask staff to double check on that, but I imagine this is part of what the state is looking for. The state model ordinance probably has septic system accommodations in it, but I don't think our Albany ordinance needs that. And maybe it's just I don't know. I say if it's not necessary and not relevant, let's take it out.
We can strike that from the draft.
Pardon?
We can strike that from the draft.
Okay, good. Great. That's it.
Okay. Commissioner McLeod, did you have any comments on this ordinance?
No, I think we're good. I asked staff earlier about fire sprinklers, but we're just conforming to state law in that respect. So it just seems like detached ADUs, I would prefer if they didn't have to be sprinklered. But I guess we can't really change that. So that's it.
Okay. I did, if other commissioners are finished, I did have just one quick edit, and I'm not sure if this was intentional or unintentional, but I believe it's on page 9 under impact fees. This is item 10. I don't know which subsection, but it refers to the impact fee not being required for an ADU less than 750 square feet. And above it talks about the limited detached ADU in D1, B2 being 800 square feet. And I would think that we would maybe want to align the requirement not to have impact fees to align with the square footage trigger for the limited detached ADUs. But certainly I could be missing something on this. So maybe defer to staff if that was an intentional delta between those two numbers or unintentional.
That number comes straight from the state statute, so that's why it's included in there. But I think if the commission's open to that, we could make that modification as well. We can always be more permissive with our ordinance than the state statute.
I would certainly be supportive just for the sake of sort of an ease and the sort of cleanliness of saying if you do an ADU that's building permit only, this limited detached ADU, you have an entirely separate set of simple rules and you don't have to start conflating different parts of the law. So I would certainly be in support of that.
Yeah, that's a good comment. I support that as well.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Well, before we call for a roll call vote, are there any final comments or thoughts that commissioners would like to share?
I guess we need a motion.
That would be great, Commissioner. If you would like to be our motion maker today.
Yeah. So I will move that we adopt Planning and Zoning Commission resolution to forward to the City Council the amended accessory dwelling unit regulations in our municipal code. I'm not sure of the number of the resolution number.
So it is 2020-01 because we continued it from the previous meeting. We kept the same resolution number.
I see. Thank you.
So it is resolution 2020-01. Okay, then I'll move approval of that. I think with a couple of minor changes that we've discussed in our conversations that I think staff has notes of.
Okay, great. Do we have a second on that motion?
I can second.
Okay, great. Seconded by Commissioner Jennings. With that, we'll call for the vote. Commissioner McLeod.
Aye.
Commissioner Donaldson.
Aye.
Commissioner Jennings.
Aye.
and Commissioner Kent.
Aye.
And I too approve that motion. So that motion passes 5-0 on the ADU ordinance, referring that to the City Council. That takes us on to item 6-2 on our agenda. 6-2 is proposed amendments to the zoning ordinance 20.20.040 home occupations of the Albany Municipal Code.
Yes. Before you is a draft of proposed amendments to our home occupation regulations. At the previous meeting, we had the commission adopt a resolution of intention to amend this section of the code. And basically, as all of the commission is aware, Assembly Bill 5, which went into effect on the 1st of the year, kind of limits the use of independent contractors throughout the state. And so what that meant for the city on a local level is that independent contractors were now required to obtain a city-issued business license to provide to their, whoever they're working for, basically. And because we have this antiquated home occupation provision, it required an additional fee and application process to be completed. And we've received some pushback from folks in the community trying to be compliant with AB 5, but then having to go through this extra step of regulatory compliance that really doesn't have an impact. And most of the time, those folks are working outside of the city limits. They're providing a home address simply because that's the property that they own within the city. So we had our city attorney look at it, and she's actually drafted the amendments that are before you. And what this effectively does is it keeps home occupations within the municipal code, but it identifies performance standards, and it eliminates the requirement for the separate permit and fee to be paid. So there still is some control in terms of restricting activities and setting performance standards, but we're not going to make independent business folks go through that extra step of paying a fee and going through an application process that really has no impact or relationship to the work that they do. And so with that, we have the draft ordinance and resolution for your consideration tonight.
Great, thank you. Commissioners, does anyone have any questions for staff on this ordinance?
Yes, I have one.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, Commissioner Kent.
On item C, requirements, it states home occupation shall be carried out in strict compliance with the following. And number 3 is that existing garages that are required for off-street parking spaces shall not be modified or used as to preclude the normal parking and storage of family vehicles. So basically, this kind of thing is done all the time, and we just kind of don't look at it. So by having this in there, we're just kind of turning a blind eye to it, especially with all this home, kind of a stay-at-home work we're doing right now. Small houses, families, everybody's there. People are trying to find whatever room they can, and so often they'll use the garages. But it's as a matter of, is this kind of archaic? Do we want this in here anymore? I mean, if we take it out, then we're allowing people to park in their driveways. Of course, they can't still block the sidewalk, but it's always kind of an odd thing, I think, in Albany's code that we don't let people park in driveways, but everybody does it.
And this is a standard that I think goes back to home occupations truly from the 50s. So if this is something that the commission wanted to have stricken from the draft, we'd be happy to accommodate that change.
I'm in favor of leaving it in. I would distinguish between having people use their garages for storage. Most people don't do that. I mean, most people do that and don't put cars in their garages. But I think it's another step if we say it's okay to build your garage out into a home office. And it's kind of like we also, if someone tries to convert a garage to a bedroom, say they need permits for that, and we're not going to give them a building permit to do that unless they meet the parking requirements. That would trigger that. So I think it's different. I think that we shouldn't have people converting their garages to home offices, just like I don't think we should have people converting their garages to building permits without having the city, the planning process review that. That's my take on it.
Well, I can understand that it's not a livable space and probably wouldn't suffice for an office, no windows, but it would also preclude using it for storage too, according to the way it's written. Normal preclude normal if it doesn't, or used so as to preclude normal parking and storage of family vehicles. So if you did use it in such a way where you couldn't put a vehicle in it, you're violating the code.
How I'm reading that is it seems to be that it's only if you're using it for home occupation, you cannot take over the garage space as part of the home occupation. But it doesn't seem to be making a reference to just you're using it as your house and you have your, storage in the garage. But Commissioner Jennings?
Yeah, well, I was going to say, I think that there is a more generally applicable provision in the municipal code that that perhaps it would make sense to revisit. That and correct me if I'm wrong, but I think there is something that generally applies, not just in the context of home occupations, that says you can't convert your garage to remove required parking spaces.
Right, exactly. Within the parking section of the city zoning code, there is effectively a replacement requirement, and that typically, depending on how parking is cited with on private property, that usually precludes some people from being able to convert their garages.
Right. Okay. But so I guess since this amendment is really just focused on home occupations, like even if we did remove that language, I don't think it would affect the more generally applicable provision. And so, I mean, I think it's a separate matter whether we want to revisit that as a general policy. But for purposes of the home occupation ordinance, I think it would be a little odd to remove that language while leaving it in effect more broadly.
Yes, and that's kind of, I guess that's my point. This is not the root of the issue here, but taking that out won't make much difference. Okay, I'm fine with leaving it in, but I do think it's something. It's kind of always struck me as odd that we're not. It's a law that we have in there. We enforce it on people that are getting permits, but not on people that already have houses. So, okay.
Are there any other comments on this ordinance?
I do have a couple of comments. I don't know if did we skip or should we do public comment?
Oh, thank you. Or? Yeah, thank you. So we'll wrap up. Are there any other remaining questions of staff? And if there are no other questions, we'll open it up for public comment. Okay. Seeing no other questions, Anne, do we have any public comment on this item?
No one raised their hand.
Okay. Great. Well, then with that, we'll turn it back to commissioners for discussioning. Commissioner Jennings, did you have a comment?
Yeah, sure. I just had a couple on the resolution itself, not on the ordinance language. But this is framed as a resolution of intention to amend the code, but I think we already adopted a resolution of intention.
Yeah, it's actually a resolution of recommendation, and
right.
we the appropriate noticing to the newspaper.
Right. So I would request that the heading of the resolution be revised to reflect that this is a resolution recommending that the city council adopt this ordinance. On the fourth whereas, it says city staff has experienced backlash from residents who are required to obtain a home occupation permit. I think that I'm sure that is an accurate statement, but it seems like kind of a strong, like, I don't know, backlash seems like a strong term to me, and I would just prefer to strike that whole clause because I don't think it's necessary here. And then the only other point was with respect to the prior hearing that we held on this proposed ordinance, there is a whereas clause describing the public notice that was provided. And I saw that in the other resolution we just acted on, it also talked about public notice for this hearing. But this resolution doesn't talk about public notice for the hearing that we're holding right now. So I would just request that we include a whereas, just to make sure that the record is clear about when staff provided notice for the hearing that we're holding right now.
Great. Yeah, we can include that with the standard date and radius.
Great. Thank you.
Those are good comments. I have one other small one, a typo. On the third whereas, I think the word increase should be increased. And that's it. I don't know. I could move.
I'll just say for the record, I support this. As I mentioned during the first hearing that we had on this, I think there is a lot of really antiquated language. So I think this is a step in the right direction, especially given all the sort of gig economy that is happening right now. I think this will help sort of loosen the regulatory burden for folks who are just taking part in the gig economy and trying to make ends meet right now. So I'm all supportive of this. With that, do we have a motion on this item?
Certainly, I can move approval. I think this is a good item. I think this is a good change to make to the zoning code, and I will approve. Recommend. I will. What am I going to do?
Forwarding a recommendation.
I will move that we approve resolution 2020-03 with modifications as discussed previously, including striking the fourth whereas, modifying the title to become a recommendation to the council to take action, and adding a whereas regarding public notices, and correcting a typo in the third whereas. With that, I move approval of this motion, of this item.
Do we have a second?
I second.
Okay, thanks, Commissioner Kent. With that, we will call for the vote. On that motion, Commissioner McLeod.
Aye.
Commissioner Donaldson.
Aye.
Commissioner Jennings.
Aye.
Commissioner Kent.
Aye.
And I too support that motion. That motion passes 5-0 with no objections. That takes us, that finishes our action items for the evening and takes us on to item 7 on our agenda, new business, of which we have none. Item 8 on our agenda, announcement and communications and discussion. Do any commissioners have any announcements? There are none otherwise agendized. Okay, seeing none, it looks like next meeting is yet to be determined.
Yeah.
I assume.
We do anticipate having 2 meetings in May, definitely the second meeting in May. We're trying to figure out the date for the first meeting in May. We're working with our consultant on her availability, so stay tuned. You may be getting an email from me about future availability for that meeting.
Okay, great. And as we said at the beginning of the meeting, just because this is a unusual new format, if we can check back with Anne to see if there is any final public comment that trickled in after we opened the hearing. Do we have any outstanding public comment?
We don't have any public attendees at this moment.
Okay. Okay, great. With then we'll take it on to item 10 on our agenda, which is adjournment. So thank you all for bearing with us on this first virtual hearing. The meeting's adjourned.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you.
That worked pretty well, I thought.